Trump deploys 700 Marines to LA. 2,700 children in Gaza suffer from acute malnutrition. Good afternoon and Salam Malaysia Madani. I'm Shuhaida Arifin and you're watching World Today. U.S. military will temporarily deploy about 700 Marines to Los Angeles until more National Guard troops can arrive, marking another escalation in President Donald Trump's response to street protests over his aggressive immigration policies. U.S. Marines have been deployed domestically for major disasters such as Hurricane Katrina and the September 11 attacks. However, it is extremely rare for the military troops to be used for domestic policing matters. Earlier on Monday, Trump said he would support the arrest of California's Gavin Newsom after Newsom vowed to sue the federal government over the deployment of National Guard troops to Southern California, calling it an illegal act. Trump deployed the National Guard after street protests on Friday that turned violent over the weekend. During a press conference on Monday, Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass demanded the federal government to stop conducting immigration raids in the city. She accused the federal government of using her city as the test case for the federal government taking over from local and state authorities and said the intervention was completely unwarranted.
Stop the raids, period. I would say give the power back to our governor. And if we need the National Guard, we can do it in their normal circumstances, which is the request is made local and the governor decides or not to grant that to our city. We need to stop the raids. This should not be happening in our city. It is not warranted, and the only thing it does is contribute to chaos. This was chaos that was started at Washington, D.C. On Thursday, the city was peaceful. On Friday, it was not because of the intervention of the federal government.
On Monday, the United States President Donald Trump will deploy an additional 2,000 National Guard troops to Los Angeles in response to ongoing immigration protests. Malaysia is deeply concerned over the detention of individuals aboard the Madlin flotilla bound for Gaza. It said the interception and harassment of the flotilla's crew exposed the deliberate and ruthless obstruction of humanitarian aid. In a statement, the Foreign Ministry said the blockade of Gaza is a brutal and barbaric act, and the international community should detest it for the sake of compassion and human dignity. Malaysia once again calls on the international community to demand the Zionist Israeli regime to seize the blockade and to allow an unimpeded delivery and access of humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza. The 18-meter sailing boat Madlin set sail for Gaza on 1st of June from the sandport of San Giovanni Ikuti in Catania, Italy, as part of the latest mission organized by the Freedom Flotilla Coalition to break the blockade on Gaza and deliver aid to the region. A total of 12 people are on board the Madlin, including 11 activists and 1 journalist. According to its organizers, the ship is carrying urgently needed supplies for the people of Gaza, including baby formula, flour, rice, diapers, women's sanitary products, water desalination kits, medical supplies, crutches, and children's prosthetics. Meanwhile, tens of thousands of people staged rallies in several European cities after Israel stopped the boat that was carrying 12 activists. In France, rallies in Paris and at least 5 other cities were called by left-wing parties, describing the seizure of the Gaza boat by the Israeli military as international piracy. President Emmanuel Macron, meanwhile, urged the immediate liberation of French nationals among the 12 activists on the vessel. Macron had requested that the 6 French nationals be allowed to return to France as soon as possible.
Ensuite et surtout, la France appelle à un cessez-le-feu au plus vite et à la levée du blocus humanitaire. Le scandale, l'inacceptable qui se joue à Gaza, c'est cela. Et c'est ce qui, depuis début mars, est une honte. Une honte. Et donc, j'ai encore eu et le président.
In Greece, over 2,000 people marched to the Israeli embassy in Athens to show their support for Palestinians and to condemn the war in Gaza. A similar protest was staged outside the UK Foreign Office in London.
So we're here to show our support, to also maintain the line that they have a legal obligation, the UK has a legal obligation to ensure the safety of these protesters who are going to Gaza with humanitarian aid as peaceful volunteers.
Israel's foreign ministry said earlier that all the passengers are safe and unharmed, and it expected the activists to return to their home countries. NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte has urged the alliance to increase its air and missile defense capabilities by 400%, citing critical military shortfalls and mounting threats from Russia and China. In a speech at Chatham House in London, Rutte proposed a new defence spending target of 5% of gross domestic product, with 3.5% dedicated to core military needs and the remainder allocated to infrastructure and industrial capacity.
We see in Ukraine how Russia delivers terror from above. So we will strengthen the shield that protects our skies. Our militaries also need thousands more armored vehicles and tanks, millions more artillery shells. And we must double our enabling capabilities, such as logistics, supply, transportation, and medical support. Allies will invest in more warships and aircraft.
While reaffirming NATO's defensive posture, Rutte issued a stern warning to potential aggressors. He added that the upcoming NATO summit in The Hague would be a key moment to shape the alliance's long-term security approach, including continued support for Ukraine. Earlier, Rutte also met UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer at 10 Downing Street to discuss increasing defence production and maintaining support for Kiev. Canada will be pouring extra billion into its armed forces and hit NATO's 2% military spending target this fiscal year, 5 years earlier than promised. Declaring the end of US global dominance, Prime Minister Mark Carney called for closer ties with Europe in a Toronto speech.
Today's announcement and this focus on meeting our own responsibilities to protect Canadians, but also our NATO obligations at the same time. This decision that we're announcing today and the associated summit at NATO towards the end of this month, those are significant events from a budget perspective, and we wanted to get to a point where we had addressed those.
Canada has been under pressure from the United States and other NATO allies for years to increase military funding. Canada currently spends about 1.4% of GDP on defense. Carney won the 28th April elections on a promise to stand up to U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs and also to reduce the country's military reliance on Washington.
NATO about
Over 2,700 children under the age of 5 in Gaza were identified as suffering from acute malnutrition last month. The latest UN report shows a sharp rise in cases since screening began in February, nearly 3 times higher than 3 months earlier. The UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, also reported that the number of children requiring hospital treatment for malnutrition has nearly doubled compared to previous months. Since January, more than 16,500 children under 5 in Gaza have received treatment, including 141 with severe complications. Tragically, only 4 medical centers across Gaza are equipped to treat acute malnutrition with medical complications. In response, the World Health Organization (WHO) has urgently called for immediate protection of the 2 main functioning hospitals, Nasser Medical Complex and Al Amal Hospital, to prevent further attacks. Hundreds of people, mainly Tunisians, launched a land convoy bound for Gaza, seeking to break the siege on the Palestinian territory. Organizers have said the 9-bus convoy was not bringing aid into Gaza, but rather aimed at carrying out a symbolic act by breaking the blockade on the territory, described by the United Nations as the hungriest place on earth. The Salmud convoy, meaning steadfastness, includes doctors and aims to arrive in Rafah in southern Gaza by the end of the week.
هذه المسيرة ليست قطار أو طائرة، إنما هي تظاهرة أو مهرجان شعبي مستقل مغاربي متنقل سيقف في عديد البلدان وفي عديد المحطات في ليبيا وفي تونس وفي مصر، وسيتحدث مع الناس وسيتحدث عن الحق الفلسطيني وسيحشد الناس، وأكثر من ذلك سيذكر الجميع أن فلسطين ليست على قنوات التواصل الاجتماعي وليست في كوكب آخر، إنها على مسير أيام على الأقدام. فالشعب العربي يجب أن يتذكر أننا رقعة واحدة وأننا شعب واحد.
Algerian, Mauritanian, Moroccan and Libyan activists were also among the group, which is set to travel along the Tunisian and Libyan coasts before continuing on to Rafah through Egypt. After 21 months of war, Israel is facing mounting international pressure to allow more aid into Gaza to alleviate widespread shortages of food and basic supplies. The UN has warned that the Palestinian territory's entire population is at risk of famine. Russia and Ukraine exchanged prisoners of war (POW) under the age of 25 on Monday in emotional homecoming scenes, the first step in a series of planned prisoner swaps that could become the biggest of the war so far. It follows the agreement reached during the recent peace talks in Istanbul, Turkey. The Ukrainian president confirmed that the exchange has begun and will take place in stages over the coming days. Russia's Ministry of Defense also confirmed the exchange. However, no official figures have been released on the number of prisoners involved. The return of POWs and the repatriation of the bodies of the dead is one of the few things the two sides have managed to agree on, as broader negotiations have failed to get close to ending the war, now in its 4th year. Fighting has raged on, with Russia saying on Monday its forces had taken control of more territory in Ukraine's east-central region of Dnipropetrovsk and Kiev, saying Moscow had launched its largest drone attack of the war. Coming up next, former Bolivian President Evo Morales accused of electoral sabotage, terrorism and public disorder. Stay tuned. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on Monday has fired all 17 members of a U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention panel of vaccine experts and is in the process of replacing them, drawing protests from many vaccine scientists. The move is the most far-reaching in a series of actions by Kennedy, a long-time vaccine skeptic, to reshape U.S. regulation of vaccines, food and medicine. Scientists and experts believe the changes to the vaccine panel, which recommends how vaccines are used and by whom, would undermine public confidence in health agencies. However, Kennedy promised the move would raise public confidence. 17 acute members were appointed under former President Joe Biden's administration, including 13 in 2024. Without their removal, Trump's administration would not have been able to choose a majority of the committee until 2028. Bolivian legal authority opened an investigation of former President Evo Morales on Monday on alleged electoral sabotage in connection to ongoing protests demanding that he be allowed to run for re-election. Attorney General Roger Mariaca said the Public Prosecutor's Office has decided to address a complaint filed by the Justice Ministry against Morales for certain criminal offences. The complaint accuses Morales of terrorism, obstructing the electoral process, disobeying constitutional resolutions, disrupting public services, and destroying state property, among other crimes linked to road blockades that paralyzed key regions of the country last week. The government said it has evidence showing that the former president ordered his supporters to encircle towns after electoral authorities rejected his bid to run for a fourth term in the general elections on 17th of August. Since last week, roadblocks put up at some 20 critical transportation points across the country have been concentrated mainly in Cochabamba department. Clashes and shortages of supplies have been reported in the affected areas. The prosecutor said the roadblocks violate fundamental rights and endanger the lives of Bolivians. The U.S. National Hurricane Center (CNH) said on Monday, Barbara became the first hurricane of the season in the eastern Pacific as it gained strength, moving parallel to the west coast of Mexico. The CNH forecasts that it will begin a weakening tendency on Tuesday. According to the latest CNH report, at 2 p.m. local time, the tropical cyclone was about 245 kilometers southwest of Manzanillo in the Mexican state of Colima and was moving at 17 kilometers per hour in a northwesterly direction with maximum sustained winds of about 120 kilometers per hour. The Mexican National Water Commission, CONAGUA, informed in a statement that due to Barbara's cloud bands, heavy rains are expected in the states of Jalisco, Colima, and Michoacán, and showers in Nayarit, in addition to strong winds and waves in those territories. The CNH has predicted that during this hurricane season, which begins between mid-May and early June and ends in November, there will be between 9 and 15 hurricanes in the Atlantic and between 7 and 15 in the Eastern Pacific. Warner Bros. Discovery WBD said it would split into two publicly traded companies, separating its studios and streaming business from its fading cable television networks as the parents of HBO and CNN looks to compete better in the streaming era. The breakup announced on Monday is the latest sign of the great unraveling of decades of media consolidation that have created global conglomerates spanning content creation, distribution, and telecommunications. It unwinds Warner Media and Discovery's 2022 merger, giving the streaming and studio business more room to scale without being weighed down by the declining networks unit. The new streaming and studios company will include Warner Bros., DC Studios, and HBO Max, the crown jewels of the WBD's entertainment library. The network unit, which will hold up to a 20% stake in its counterpart, will house CNN, TNT Sports, and Bleacher Report. The separation will be structured as a tax-free transaction and is expected to be completed by mid-2026. Apple announced on Monday a slew of artificial intelligence features, including opening up the underlying technology it uses for Apple Intelligence in a modest update of its software and services as it lays the groundwork for future advances. The presentations at its annual Worldwide Developers Conference focus more on incremental developments, including live translation for phone calls and design changes to its operating system that improve everyday life rather than the sweeping ambitions for AI that Apple's rivals are marketing. Leslie Ikimoto, Apple's Director of Input Experience, demonstrated how the company's AI will help close language gaps through real-time translations.
In messages, live translation can automatically translate text for you. So if you're making plans with some new friends while studying abroad, your message can be translated as you type and delivered in their preferred language. And when they respond, each text can be instantly translated for you.
The shares of Apple, which were flat before the start of the event, closed about 1.2% lower on Monday. K-pop megastars RM and V from BTS were released on Tuesday after service 18 months of South Korean military service, prompting a fan frenzy. The 7 members of BTS have been on a hiatus since 2022, while they separately undertake mandatory military service required of all South Korean men under the age of 30. Hundreds of fans gathered near 2 army bases just outside the capital Seoul, where band leader RM and singer V were discharged. In total, 4 BTS members will complete their service this week. 2 were discharged last year, and the final member, Suga, who has been working as a social service agent for alternative non-active duty service, will be released later this month. In sports, Belgium battle past Wales, Italy win in World Cup qualifying. All right, we kick off our sports segment with World Cup news. Kevin De Bruyne spared Belgium blushes after blowing a 3-0 lead to beat Wales 4-3 and kickstart the Red Devils' 2026 World Cup qualifying campaign on Monday. Goals from Romelu Lukaku, Yuri Tielemans and Jeremy Doku inside half an hour had given Belgium a dream start. Wales, though, rallied through a Harry Wilson penalty, Sorba Thomas and Brennan Johnson to stun the side ranked 8th in the world. But De Bruyne rode to his nation's rescue by steering in Tielemans' perfect cross in the 88th minute. The feed was Craig Bellamy's first as Wales manager, as they fell just short of a national record of 10 matches unbeaten. However, there remains plenty of positive for Wales' hopes of reaching next year's World Cup. They sit second in Group J, 1 point behind North Macedonia and 3 in front of Belgium, who have 2 games in hand. Only one side will automatically qualify, with a second earning a place in the playoffs. Meanwhile, Italy got off the mark in their World Cup qualifying campaign with a 2-0 win over Moldova, Luciano Spalletti's last game as Italy coach. Giacomo Raspadori and Andrea Cambiaso scored in each half to inject a smidgen of pride back in the Azzurri camp after last week's 3-0 thrashing by Norway, which cost Spalletti his job. The Italians trail Norway by 9 points in European qualifying Group 1 and are at risk of missing out on the 3rd straight World Cup. Even though they have played 2 games less, their ticket to the United States, Canada and Mexico next year is far from certain. Only top spot in each group guarantees automatic qualification, with Italy's best hopes appearing to rest on finishing second and reaching the playoffs. Brazil coach Carlo Ancelotti is hopeful of winning when the national team faces Paraguay at home. The Italian manager, appointed last month, is under considerable pressure as he faces the tough task of guiding the 5-time world champions Brazil back to form. The top 6 teams qualify directly for the next year's World Cup. Brazil remains in 4th place with 22 points in the continental standings. They face Paraguay on the same day as Ancelotti's birthday, who underlined the best gift would be to win the match against Paraguay.
Es que intentaremos de hacer un partido intenso, jugando bien, intentando de jugar un fútbol de ataque por lo posible, teniendo en cuenta el valor del equipo rival, que es muy fuerte, porque Paraguay está jugando muy bien, es un equipo muy sólido.
Brazil will host Paraguay on Tuesday at the Neoquímica Arena Stadium in Sao Paulo. Algeria defender Ryan Anouri has joined Manchester City from Wolverhampton Wanderers on a 5-year deal ahead of this month's Club World Cup. Financial details were not disclosed, but British media reported City paid a fee of around £33.7 million to sign the 24-year-old who had 1 year left on his Wolves contract. Anouri initially joined Wolves on loan from League R side Angers in 2020 before making the move permanent the following year. He leaves Wolves after 5 seasons, having made 157 appearances with 12 goals and 19 assists. City finished 3rd in the 2024-2025 Premier League season and only secured a Champions League berth on the final day of the campaign. Pep Guardiola's side are next in action at the Club World Cup in the United States. They face Wydad AC in their opening game on 18th of June before taking on Al Ain and Juventus in their other Group G fixtures. Meanwhile, former England goalkeeper Scott Carson will leave Manchester City when his contract expires this summer. The 39-year-old has spent 6 years at City, serving as the third-choice goalkeeper under Pep Guardiola. Despite making only 2 first-team appearances, he was part of the squad that won 12 trophies, including the Champions League in 2023. He came on as a late substitute in a Champions League last 16 second-leg draw with Sporting Lisbon in March 2022. Carson spent much of his time at City as a third-choice keeper behind Ederson and Stefan Ortega, playing only 117 minutes in total. A club statement said, Manchester City appreciates his commitment and dedication and wishes him all the best for the future. Carson initially joined the Citizens on loan from Derby County in 2019 before making the move permanent in 2021. Over his 21-year career, he played for several clubs, including Leeds United, Liverpool and West Bromwich Albion, and earned 4 caps with the England national team. Bayern Munich will be able to field their new defensive signing Jonathan Tah at the Club World Cup after reaching an agreement with Bayer Leverkusen to begin his contract at the start of the tournament. The 28-year-old Germany defender, who made 402 appearances for Leverkusen and helped them win the Bundesliga in 2023-2024, signed a 4-year contract with Bayern on 29th of May on a free transfer. On Tuesday, Bayern fly out to the United States to prepare for the Club World Cup in Orlando. And that wraps up our bulletin this afternoon. In our top story, U.S. deploys 700 Marines to Los Angeles as immigration protests turn violent. Do join us again this evening at 8:30 p.m. for more news on Saluran Berita RTM and TV1, or you can always stream us online on RTM Click's website and mobile application. Till then, I'm Shuhaida Arifin from River to the Sea. Palestine will be free. Goodbye for now. Thank you for watching.